Hi. Well, here we go again, but guess what? You remember I told you about that weatherman was finally right and we did get a rainstorm on time? Well, we had 3 storms that whole week, and now we're suffering for it. These desert weeds, they pop right up and they're blooming now, and my eyeballs and my nose is running. So I do have a tissue handy. I think I can make it though. We'll go on with the reading that we got for today's scheduled, okay? See how far we can get before the nose runs away. Okay, we are on, what page are we on? Okay, we're on page 138. Alrighty? We are in Awakening in High Meadow, or at High Meadow. Alrighty, so they have just, They're talking about while they're walking and meandering around, the boys, the camera guys, got tired of just meandering, so they started asking questions. So Thomas has just answered one question and says, because of all that dirt that Charlie had put on the backside of the barn to make a hill, that made seasonal loading of the winter hay really easy. So Paul nods his head and continues. I sure could tell Bruce enjoys that type of work. He told us all about Charlie designing the plans for the guest house, the bunkhouse, and how he gave Maria free rein for planning the kitchen in the main house, and building the foreman's house. Thomas kindly says, yes, Maria is a great planner too. Paul continues. Charlie even let Maria choose a location for their foreman's house. That's amazing. Bruce also said that the bunkhouse was finished first, and the only one barn was done for the opening. In fact, he said it took 18 months to get those few buildings done for opening day, or week, as he said. Ralph picks up this conversation by adding, yeah, and he told us that the front stables were half the size that they are now. He didn't talk about that arena being built then. When did that get built? Thomas smiles and responds quickly, not until after their second year of operation. They had a hard winter, and the horses couldn't get out for good exercising. Ralph nods his head as he says, that makes sense. You folks sure get a lot snowier days up here than we do. Paul jumps right in and says, Bruce said that the main house was only in phase 1 of completion for the opening, and that phase 4 is not even done yet. Interesting how Charlie planned each addition for the main house, like making sure there's a fireplace in each room. Thomas cuts in and says, except for his library. He didn't want his precious books catching on fire, so he had a radiant heater units put in under each of the windows. Ralph curiously asks, I'm not sure what that is. Thomas doesn't slow down his pace a bit. He keeps right on walking. He continues walking as he explains. Kind of old-fashioned. It's like an oil-filled radiator. Electricity runs it, with a thermometer to regulate the heat. Oh, they work really well. Yeah, I know, I had one. That's why it's in the story. Okay. Ella has some info to add too, and says, all those fireplaces in each room make for a nice, cozy winter. There's no central heating in this house. Thomas agrees and says, we have plenty of dead trees, down or standing, to handle all the wood needs that we have. We keep that woodshed full and never know when it's going to be expected and needed. Ella adds, and lots of spraying around the outside to keep the bugs out. Well, kind of stinky, but still it works. Thomas shakes his head with a grin as he said, you would remember that. Ella picks up the story. Did you know that the main entry and all the bathrooms have radiant floor heating? That helps keep the house warm and toasty in the winter. Ralph and Pilot look at each other. They shrug their shoulders and keep their cameras rolling as they're walking a respectful pace away from Thomas and Ella. Paul has another question. And what's with all the barns? Ella smiles as she answers. They aren't all barns. 2 of them are stables for the horses. 1 barn is for winter food, and the chuck wagon, well, the 1 horse open sleigh for winter also. And, and the furrier equipment's in that barn too. 1 barn is for Paula and Betsy, our milk cows, the goats, and the steward's horses, as well as for the winter straw that's needed for mucking. 2 stables for the horses and tack. We were living here when they were building the guest house in that last barn and stable. Uncle Charlie named that last barn Rachel. Thomas thoughtfully adds, rather fitting it was for the last building. Ralph and Paul shrugged their shoulders. Ralph, not understanding what was said, asked, well, why would that be? Ella perks up the story of Jacob and Rachel from the Old Testament. With another shrug of their shoulders, Ralph and Paul just give blank looks. Ella, the storyteller, takes this as a sign to keep talking. Well, Jacob fell in love with Rachel the first time he saw her. Her father thought she was too young to get married, and Jacob didn't have a dowry to pay him. Well, that was the custom back in those days. So Jacob was willing to work for 7 years to pay for his beloved Rachel. Thomas looks at Paul and Ralph and says, do you get it now? Charlie had to work for 7 years, making 8 improvements on the 320 acres to earn the homestead rights for all those sections. That was the deal. Ralph is amazed and says, that's amazing, I didn't know that. Ralph agrees. Good story about the last barn's name. Ella reprovingly responds, it's not just a story I made up. It's in the scriptures, and you can find it yourself. That goes for you. You could too. Paul just shrugs his shoulders as he continues filming her. Thomas continues. Those are the buildings for the homestead. The 4 houses, 2 barns, 2 stables. That arena was the clincher. They equal the 8 improvements needed, with the provisions that only the original 320 acres are for personal use and buildings. That's located actually in Section 5. The first section was designated for pasture land. Section 2 is half pasture land and half cultivation, with the other 2 full sections, numbers 3 and 4, to be used for trail rides and cultivation. And the remaining 11.5 acres of the land to be a natural preserve for trail rides, camping, and hiking. That was the deal Jack Timberline made under the government land grant division. Homesteading improvements. You can still do it today. Did you know that? Actually, do you know that? It's true. My sister Debbie did that up in Montana. Well, she applied for it. Paul quickly said, they ended up in Texas, by the way. Paul quickly says, well, I can see why Charlie would let Jack stay for no charge. Charlie got all this land because of him. Thomas admittedly adds, that's right, and Jack and his family helped build the guest house, so they love coming to my ranch. They feel like they're part of it. Paul speaks right up. Yeah, what's with that name? Noticed it on the sign above the main gate when I first came here. How did Charlie come up with that name? You know, I never asked Charlie about that. Thomas is surprised Bruce didn't tell them about that last night. Then he explains. I know how that name came to be. Uncle Charlie had the name saved up since he first started dreaming about this ranch. He felt it would give the guests a feeling that they belonged. Ella quickly says, actually, as I recall, Uncle Charlie told us that Angela, his wife, had thought of the name for this ranch, and he thought it was just great. Angela thought folks would feel like they belonged, and I'm sad to report it didn't work for us. Mainly because we always called it Uncle Charlie's ranch. Thomas shakes his head, looking at the ground for a moment, and says, yeah, until we started a school here in the valley. nobody knew it as Uncle Charlie's ranch. They kept saying, where is it you live? Until someone finally says, oh, you mean my ranch. It was like a light bulb going off in my head. Ella chuckles at the thought of that. As she said, everyone in school felt it was like their ranch. They had all been here helping build the barns and the stables, cleaning horse stalls, weeding in the garden. Everyone, except us. Well, we did learn to do these things too after we moved here. And I finally gained respect for my ranch. I remember when we invited our classmates to come and help build the dam for the old fishing hole. Thomas shakes his head in the affirmative as he says, yeah, that was actually fun. Now that you mention it, I'd forgotten about that. Not sure which part was most fun, piling up those branches or hauling in all that dirt that was needed to fill the concrete bed. Ella scrunches up her face with a question and asks, now that you mention it, I do remember those wheelbarrow runs, just can't remember why we did it. Or wait, is it because the fish needed to hibernate for the winter? Shh. Hibernate for the winter? Thomas is quick to reply. That was something Uncle Charlie let me research, so I do remember why. Mountain fish don't actually hibernate in the winter. They just need a certain depth of mud to burrow into for their survival, and they go dormant, like frogs and other amphibians. Well, Joshua, come on, behave. You go outside. Go on, get outside. That dog was just too close to his fence and he wanted to get it. So anyway, back to the story. Alrighty, they go dormant like frogs and other amphibians. Okay, now he actually is going out to his own doggy door to get that dog too close to his fence. Okay, most fish simply school in the deepest parts of the pools and take a winter rest. In this resting state, the fish's hearts slow down, their needs for food and oxygen decrease, and they move very little. Paul is impressed with Thomas's research abilities even at such a young age. Thomas continues, it took a lot of us kids and a bazillion wheelbarrows of dirt to get the right amount into the bottom of that cement pond. Our classmates came every day after school to help us. Ella smiles and says, I do remember doing that with a ton of our classmates. Thomas gets thoughtful again and he says, yeah, those valley folks, they sure helped us see that a lot of community activities happened right here at my ranch. And we're going to end it right there on page 141. We'll turn the page and mark it for next time. So you all have a nice evening with your family. Maybe a little popcorn and movies. Well, whatever you do, I hope you remember that Jesus loves you, and so do I. Bye-bye for now. Love hugs from Grama Jean.